You may have noticed that I'm dressed like someone very famous in movie history.
I didn't notice anything.
You didn't notice?
I thought this was just Tuesday. This is usually how you look.
Well, usually I put
Tuesdays.
this stuff off and then I put a suit on before we start. But today I thought, let's just wear this because we're celebrating Indiana Jones on Blu-ray. And if you're one of the lucky few people that are able to see Raiders of the Lost Ark in IMAX, it's all happening right now. And we love Indiana Jones, and we thought we would have a whole week celebrating the best of Indy.
He is having a pop culture moment right
Yes.
now like you wouldn't believe. And I have to say, being in your general vicinity, I feel a lot safer. I feel like anything could happen.
all you
Nazis
need,
could
man.
come at us.
We're good.
And I would be okay. I remember seeing this movie as a kid, and I was so enthralled and entranced by this experience. I mean, I would say that this is second only to Star Wars for being the reason why I am the man that I am
Why
today.
we're standing right here
Why
right
we're
now.
standing here right now.
Yeah, I can
Absolutely.
certainly equate it to Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and probably Superman the movie, the old Richard Donner classic. Those are the three movies that I think propelled me into thinking about acting and thinking about getting into this crazy, show business kind of world.
Thinking about shopping for fedoras.
Yeah, thinking about how do I recreate that costume, and I know that none of this stuff looks movie authentic except for the bag. This is the real Mark VII bag. All of this stuff
right?
is just, I've pretty
What
much
is
had
this
this
thing down
outfit. That's my whip. Careful with that.
All right, sorry for that.
And it's a terrible whip. I haven't picked up all the movie authentic props yet.
Yeah.
One day I will.
Yeah, you make a very convincing Indiana Jones. Let's talk a little bit about why this movie continues to resonate with audiences everywhere. This is a movie that you and I both watch at least a couple times a year.
I was a bit skeptical when I saw it, even though I loved George Lucas and Star Wars. When I saw the previews for the film, all I could see coming off the screen was that it was about Moses breaking tablets and putting them in the Ark. There was a lot of religious sort of commentary coming at me.
Yes.
And I was already freaked out about Sunday school back in those days, so I did not want to go to a movie about Sunday school.
Yes.
So it took me a while. It was in theaters for about 3 months before I went to see it. I saw Raiders in Vancouver at a theater in the summer of '81 when it came out, and I ended up seeing it 14 times that summer. I kept paying to go back and see it and to hear those ridiculously over-the-top sound effects of guns going off and whips cracking and all of that incredible action. I'd never seen anything like that before, even though this is obviously an homage to filmmaking of yesteryear.
Yeah, well, obviously we're not old enough to remember the filmmaking of yesteryear. And I think that's key to the longevity of Raiders is the fact that it feels at once familiar and foreign at the same time. It does feel like something we've seen or we've experienced before, but at the same time, we're taken to all of these exotic places all over the world. I mean, this is the first movie that made me curious about the world outside of where I lived. I started thinking about other countries. I started thinking about getting into a tiny red dot and just watching it travel from country to country. And that's really the first time I ever felt like going anywhere.
Well, he's an incredible hero because he's so unbelievably intelligent. He's passionate about the collection of these antiquities. He's a school teacher, and he's a badass as well. He combines all of the best traits that you would want. He's a bit of a scoundrel, and he's not fair to the women in his life. And I think that's what makes him perfect. He's not perfect. Right down to the scar on Harrison Ford's chin. It was perfect timing, perfect casting, perfect hero for the day. And you're right, it was an homage to a simpler time, but it felt like it had always been there. When it arrived on the scene, it felt like there's a permanence to this character and to this mythology. It was just the perfect avenue for these three men, for George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and Harrison Ford. They were at the right time in all three of their collective careers. They weren't too famous, and they weren't held back by any limitations. So they could go out all on a limb as far as they want, shoot on location, shoot fast, shoot loose, come up with different scenes. Like we all know the story of Harrison Ford saying, well, why don't I just shoot this guy? And then Spielberg says, okay, shoot him. And that ends up in the picture. And I think that vitality, that animalistic kind of reach to build something that was just exciting to them is what has happened for the world when they claimed Raiders as their own.
And I think that's what you feel in these movies is the excitement behind the scenes. You get a sense of the childlike wonder and excitement from Spielberg, Lucas, and Harrison Ford to some degree. This was one of those back to the drawing board type moments for pop culture. Every other movie out there, every other video game at the time, they saw this movie and they had to take what they were building at the time and go back to the beginning and rebuild it to reflect the new world that we lived in. There was pre-Raiders, Raiders and there was post-Raiders. Right. Almost everything after post-Raiders that you and I have loved has been a reflection of Raiders to some degree.
And, you know, Raiders to me is the perfect movie. It has risen over time, and it's always bounced between other ones that I've loved, but it is my favorite film of all time. And it is absolute from start to finish, perfect film that doesn't let up, but has lots of humanity. You get to really understand who this character is. And it feels, as good as the other Indiana Jones movies are, that they are also a bit of a mirror reflection, and they're trying to recapture the magic of the first one. Almost like they become increasingly so more like Indiana Jones the Ride than Indiana Jones the Experience. And that's what we kind of got with the Star Wars movies as well. They just became so aware of themselves. There was so much fan service built into everything.
And that happens. You lose that sense of innocence after the first one. Everybody gets famous, everybody gets rich, and so how can the movies not have a bit of a wink in them after that?
Absolutely.
And you see the reach of this movie and a whole bunch of other movies. Remember the Romancing the Stone series? We also had Brendan Fraser in The Mummy. Brendan Fraser, obviously the poor man's Harrison Ford.
They keep trying to kind of find a new indie. You know, every 5-10 years or so, they bring out another movie. That was a fun franchise, and he did a pretty good job, but it was not Indiana Jones.
You take The Jungle, you include some archaeological digs in there, you have some fights in there, you have some supernatural elements. Boom, that's the whole formula.
And Tomb Raider's been borrowing from it. There was Tales of the Gold Monkey and Bring 'Em Back Alive way back in the day on TV, and I liked both of those shows because I'm such a big indie nerd.
And I just feel like every game that has puzzle solving in it after Raiders of the Lost Ark has been influenced by Raiders, like moving around stuff in a tiny underground cavern. That all came from Raiders.
Yeah, anytime you're going into ruins, you are having the tip of the fedora back to Raiders of the Lost Ark. But I guess the most obvious one, of course, is the Uncharted franchise, which I think out of all of the other things that have been influenced by Raiders and the Indiana Jones series, Uncharted comes closest to recapturing that magic.
I agree, and I think the biggest crime at this point is that we only have 4 Indiana Jones movies, and right now it looks like that's all there's going to be.
That makes me so sad. This would be the perfect time to announce a new one, but we haven't heard anything yet. But we're going to be celebrating Indiana Jones all week long, and right now we've got to take a break, but we'll be right back with more reviews.